Forbes magazine reports that in the post-pandemic world, mental health has become a mainstream issue, and employers who take advantage of employee mental health initiatives and make that a priority can give themselves a competitive edge. LinkedIn adds that nighttime workers are 22% more likely to develop depression and 17% more likely to have other anxieties. U.S. National Health U.S. National Institutes of Health, the World Health Organization, and many other global scientific research groups affirm the link between working at night and mental health concerns. So, for those of us who appreciate the tangible and intangible value of our cities' nighttime and cultural economies, what can businesses, organizations, and governments do to strengthen the well-being of nighttime workers? And what can individuals who work at night do for themselves? That's what we're talking about here today. And I'm glad you've joined us. Minding the Night is a webinar from the Public Service Project 24-Hour Nation. My name is Randall White. Thank you for coming. My guests today are from New York City, Ariel Palitz, founder and former director of New York City's Mayor's Office of Nightlife. Now she is a managing director of hospitality and intergovernmental affairs for Oak Tree Solutions. It's a New York-based public affairs firm. Ariel's trajectory has taken her from being a New York City bar owner to being a very highly regarded and international leader for the nighttime economy movement. From Ghent, Belgium, Eline van Aldenade. How did I do? Very good. Okay. Is a nightlife coach, consultant, speaker, and head of her own consultancy called the Unicorn Mothership. Aileen offers wellness coaching, mentoring, and online education for nightlife workers, creative professionals. Aileen also has a healthy grasp, I might say, on the electronic dance music scene, which can often be toxic. She'll talk about that, I'll bet. From Bristol, England, Carly Heath is the Nighttime Economy Advisor for Bristol City Council. In that capacity, she also chairs Bristol Nights, a collaborative project between the city, public health resources, and Bristol's nighttime employers. More than 116,000 people work at night in Bristol. This is 41% of that city's jobs. Carly's relationship with the nighttime economy began in her teens. I love this image as one of those kids who hangs outside clubs, handing out flyers for the next concert someplace. Here's an outline of the hour. I'll ask each of the panelists to present for about 10 minutes. Then I will ask them a few questions to prime the pump, ask if they have questions of each other. Then I will triage your questions that you post in the chat or in the question box. And at any point, the panelists may respond to some of your chat inquiries or questions as well. This webinar is being recorded. It'll be posted to the 24-Hour Nation website in a few days and to our YouTube channel for our audience, so you know who's in the audience. So far, our registrants have included elected officials, city and county department heads, nighttime economy managers and night mayors, it depends on which country you're in, club owners, researchers, harm reduction specialists, experts in these fields: economic development, nighttime economy strategies, urban planning, security, lighting design, arts and culture, and transportation planning. I'm very impressed with who registered for this webinar. Geographically, they span the globe, from Australia and China to Italy and Georgia, the country, not the state, and from Canada to Colombia. So we're very glad you're with us. Thank you again, ladies, for joining us for this panel. And I am going to begin with our Ariel. Tell us a little bit about your work, your knowledge about the what you've done in, or what you've helped make happen in reality in New York City in terms of the nighttime workforce and their emotional well-being. Hi, Ariel.
Hello, Randall. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor to be here with these incredible, lovely ladies as well, and to talk about something that's really important to all of us. I also want to give a shout out to whoever does your graphics. They are literally the most stunning graphics in the game and deserve a special shout out.
Well, thank you. It's what I do for my mental health, to tell you the truth. Okay.
You're truly a creative master at
Thank
marketing.
you.
So I wanted to give you your props. Yeah, it's true. I'm, no longer the sitting nightlife director for New York, but I am a former promoter club kid. I am a former club owner, which I ran for 10 years, which really helped to inform my sort of common sense problem solving for the day to day life of people who work at night. And it just was an extraordinary opportunity to be able to take the resources of a city, like New York, and to see how can we really not just approach nightlife as something that needs to be enforced, restricted, controlled, managed from a business standpoint, but really to address the needs of the people that work within it and live within it. And very often when we think about nighttime management and nightmares, it's all about, it tends to be about the business side, but really without the workers and their well-being, we're not really serving them in a meaningful way and helping it to thrive. So obviously, nightlife well-being has always been an issue, since the first beer was poured. I feel like a lot of people that work at night um, tend to not fit in the box of regular day-to-day formality. And they choose a more fluid, more creative lifestyle because they don't conform to the rigors of a daily job, because they are more creative thinkers. Maybe they've had more experience that makes it necessary for them to deal with people in a different way. And so everyone who comes to life at night are sort of the misfits of the universe in the most beautiful way. I think what we saw during the pandemic, it actually exacerbated all of that. A lot of people who go to nightlife need and go there for community, for safety. Um, for a sense of belonging. And when that disappeared, there was a real that safety net that people rely on for their existence, sometimes to keep people talk about substance use, but actually a lot of people find their sobriety among people within nightlife. And I think we saw during the pandemic people did a lot of relapse, right? Going deeper into their addictions, not, contrary to what one might think, right? That people are out there drinking. Actually, it's a place of safety for them not to. Um, Depression, suicidal tendencies, things really escalated in a major way. And having been in that position at the mayor's office of nightlife at that time gave me an extraordinary opportunity to be able to tap into the resources. And this is sort of what part of my main message is now, especially for people who work in government or work with governments and are looking to support the nighttime workers, is that most cities have a bountiful resource of mental health and support and well-being that are funded within perhaps your Department of Health. And very often people will think, well, it's expensive and there's not a lot of resources. But actually, if you look to your city's existing resources, not necessarily for nightlife workers, but for all citizens, there are a tremendous amount of funded services that cities already provide. And it's the job as nightlife advocates to find those resources and then reframe them for our community. And so that's what we did primarily. We also partnered with an organization that's also funded called Backline, which does a lot of out of Texas, that does a lot of work with people in the arts and music. So during the pandemic, we actually partnered with them and funded them to host weekly online support groups for people that were sheltering in place at home. Um, And that sort of ran its course during the pandemic. Once people started coming out again, there was less of a need, we found, for online support groups. However, it's a tremendous tool, and it's not expensive, and people don't have to leave, and they can find that sort of safe haven community as well. But I found the easiest thing that we were able to do, and people can find it on nyc.gov slash elevate nightlife. And what we did was we compiled lists and resources specific, not necessarily specific to nightlife, but that we knew they would benefit from. And so you can go on the website and you can find almost everything that you need, right? Whether there's free and affordable health care that the city provides, regardless of immigration status,
Mm.
regardless of your income level, they will find a way. There's 24/7 hotlines for mental health and well-being. Um, and there's plenty of resources like that around the world. It's not necessarily specific to New York, although we have tremendous resources. Obviously, there's a lot of Narcan and overdose prevention resources, sexual assault, or trauma, mental health. And I think there's a lot of reactive. But what the one last point I'd like to make is that I think it's also very important that, especially now that we're sort of post pandemic and can address the issues prior to that experience we had, is that it's about also prevention and looking out for each other. The way I look at this and pretty much everything when it comes to governance and well-being, um, and nightlife support, is that it's about collective responsibility.
Mm.
You have to, in large part, be responsible for yourself, but you also have to be responsible for your friends. You also have to be responsible for your coworkers. You also have to be responsible for your employees. And I think that if we don't see this as someone else's problem and we see it as a collective problem, you know what you have to do for yourself. If you have to know what your toolbox is. For me, it's swimming, meditation, a walk, but whatever brings you back to self, you need to make sure that you have those tools near you. If you have a friend who maybe took too much of a substance or drinking in a venue, you don't let them go home alone. If you know as an employer, your nightlife, maybe there was a big fight the week before and people are traumatized, maybe having group meditation in your venue before the shift starts. They're doing it in schools for elementary school kids. Having a group meditation before a shift starts brings together a team and centers everyone. So I think prevention and response, and always finding the path of least resistance, and look for what already exists so you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
I want to ask you about that, Ariel. The half the time, nighttime advocates are in the position of trying to put in people's heads that there is this entire thing that happens between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. and that it doesn't get the attention of the daytime leadership or elected officials or policymakers. How did you go around and shop the idea from all of these municipal departments? What was the case for support, if you would, as they would say, for saying we've got all of these pockets. Let's pull together and focus on our nighttime workforce right now. What did you tell them that persuaded them to go, oh, you're right?
Mhm. Well, I mean, it goes back to collective responsibility,
Mm.
and it's actually mutually beneficial problem solving. If you are looking to the mayor's office of community mental health or the Department of Health, they have the obligation, responsibility, and challenge of showing they're servicing people. They are looking to find community to give their resources to. Right? So you're not helping me. I'm helping you help
Nice,
me, help you, help me. And that
nice.
goes for like we just dismantled I just, our team, my last hurrah.
This was a fantastic success. Tell us about it. Go ahead.
Well, it's a side note that we dismantled a decades-long multi-agency, excessive enforcement task force. And it's how do you get multi-agencies to not only create something but dismantle something is this is your problem. You're the one who has to go out every night. You're the one who has to use excessive and limited resources. So I think the approach has to be, how can I help you? What are your challenges in your mental health or well-being services? What are the challenges you're meeting? And usually they have to prove, especially if they're getting funded,
Hmm.
that they have high numbers. So actually, every organization or program we ever uh, approached was in need of having resources and access to our community. So it's all about being mutually beneficial.
Good, good. Well, and I think too, for those on this call who may be apart from government, but may be advocates in a community or part of a community organization that's advocating for the nighttime economy. Here's an opportunity for you then also, if your city has a nighttime economy manager or a night mayor, here is your opportunity to kind of coalesce with them and bring the community attention to the city stepping up and combining its resources and its county resources. You're exactly right. I found the same experience in Dallas in workforce development too. There's a lot of pockets out there that are well funded and that need the numbers. Thank you, Ariel. We'll come back in a bit. I want to go next to Eileen van Oudenarde. I'm trying, Eileen.
That was really
The
good.
it's bad enough that I was educated in the United States. I've been in Texas for 40 years. It's my mouth just doesn't want to work. But tell us a little, go ahead and give us your sense. The thing that is the reason why you're really on this panel is that you work one-on-one with individuals, particularly with performing artists and creatives and DJs in the EDM world, electronic dance music world. And so talk to us about the individual responsibility for taking care of yourself in a nighttime culture that can be abusive.
Okay, that's a lot.
Go.
So, so really my take has been since 2015 because, I was also going out a lot and working behind the scenes, in artist management and artist handling and going with my friends on their European tours, from city to city and seeing everything happening backstage and also everything happening on the dance floor. But mostly I would see a lot of the pressures that were going on for artists, for DJs, for producers. I would see, them having to figure out a lot of things going wrong, a lot of stress around, are is my gear going to be, up to par? Is everything going to be present in the way that I need it to do my job and to, fully offer the audience what I envision them to have from me tonight during the set. And so really, I feel like it comes down just to a lot of pressures, the pressure to be perfect, the pressure to, perform, to the fear of failure, to replicate success, to have success, to, to stand out, to get noticed. There's always somebody else around the corner ready to take your spot, and then there's all of these other pressures of, there's alcohol, there's drugs, there's late nights, there's playing a set, a lot of adrenaline in your body, and then you kind of get stuffed into a box, aka your hotel room, and you have to deal with all of the vibrancy of the dance floor sort of on your own. And then oftentimes what I see happen is the way to deal with that is let's go to the after party, let's not go to sleep. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like the after party can be freaking amazing. But it has to be done in a mindful way, right? So basically what I really saw was that I wanted to start building awareness for mental wellness as a long-term strategy for success, for sustainable success, without feeling like you have to hustle. without eventually burning out, because a lot of these DJs, producers, musicians in general, and even other people working behind the scenes, there's a lot more going on than just a DJ and a producer in a club, right? There's people at the bar, there's people at the door, there's light, there's sound. So, all of these people work really hard, irregular hours, don't get quality sleep, eat oftentimes shitty meals, or don't eat, use substances to stay awake, to keep going sometimes. So I feel like burnout is often not far away for people who work, in the nights. So that's why I wanted to start really advocating for this. So my brand, my consultancy, the Unicorn Mothership, was born to really advocate for electronic music wellness and sustainable success. And so for me personally, I call myself a nightlife coach, but I was trained by a therapist who trained me and other people to become coaches, life coaches. But because I work in nightlife, I call myself a nightlife coach. And so I do have an extensive experience in the music industry. I've been, working in this industry ever since I was 17, 18. As I already mentioned and touched upon, a variety of roles, working in artist management, radio, streaming. I also held a lot of day jobs. So I was also very much the one at the start of my career to balance a day job, balance an 8 to 5 with, work in the music industry. Sometimes I would just work, through my lunches and be writing blog posts or writing outlines for podcasts or radio shows or interviews, or sometimes I would even just do that whilst I was supposed to be working for the employer, but who cares, whatever. I was done with my work and I just felt more inclined to do something creative. But anyway, at some point I decided to start doing this because I just really saw within my own life, within my own mental health issues, but also, within nightlife, which is the place that I actually escaped to find myself, to kind of come to terms with myself. But also there was a shadow side there. And so I saw kind of my own shadow side and a collective shadow side that I wanted to, I guess, help elevate, and without judgment and without telling other people what to do or how to live, but offering them, I think, Ariel, you said it so beautifully, and I always call it the smallest intervention that will have the biggest impact on your life. It doesn't have to be hard. I also help people build their toolboxes, with meditation, with self-coaching, with a lot of what I do comes from Gestalt therapy, exercises, positive psychology, EMDR, EFT, things that people can do on their own that can only be like taking 10 to 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be an hour, but really so they can help themselves and feel more empowered to do it. But so, yeah, some of my most popular services are my holistic coaching. So I do really work a lot around the topics of, sobriety, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, pressure, creative block, and so on. I also do a lot of public speaking and workshops, specifically peer support group sessions. I'm trying to move away from doing a lot of panels at conferences, for example, but preferably, and I actually just did that last week at Eurosonic in the Netherlands,
Right.
was delivering 2 group sessions, and people were really very positive about that, because I started out each session with a group grounding meditation, and help them visualize, their biggest talents, their biggest skill that they could talk to other people about at the conference. And so just really sourcing information and knowledge from the group, rather than me talking at them, and helping everybody really, to help each other, I guess, and it's really powerful to see all of the stories that were shared, and that went around, and the tips and the tricks and the experiences that people have. So anyway, and then I also do podcasting and blogging to talk about my services. But so for tonight, I really wanted to pull a few numbers. There's a lot more. but I did want to pull a few numbers. So this is from the UK specifically, this slide. 1 in 5 hospitality workers suffer from work-related severe mental health issues. And I have to move my box because I can only see your faces and I can't see. There we go. Over 4 out of 5 hospitality workers reported increased stress, which was believed to be a direct consequence of their job. So this was specifically related to the United Kingdom. And then this is pulled from a study also from the United Kingdom, Can Music Make You Sick? That was done in 2016, where it was found that musicians could be up to 3 times more likely to suffer from depression compared to the general public in the UK. And within that same study, over 50% found it difficult to get help. And then another study, which was done by a Swedish company called Record Union in 2019, found that only 19% of, I think it was over 2,000 participants at the survey, said that they think the music industry is working to create a sustainable climate with healthy artists. So I really feel like we want to get that number up, right? We want more people to feel that there's actually enough that we're doing to create a sustainable industry. And I've also found in my own work as a one-to-one coach, the importance of people feeling like they really have somebody in front of them who understands the business, because there are specific challenges to working in the night, to working in the electronic music industry. This is a quote that I took from one of my one-to-one clients who preferred to remain anonymous, but this is something that I see across one-to-one coaching sessions. Is oftentimes I do refer people to psychologists, therapists, or psychiatrists, but we do often work in tandem because they do feel like they want to have somebody who really understands the business really deeply, like me and everybody here present. Then a study that I did, which was published in 2021, well, I did that together with the University of Brussels and Amsterdam, and it was published in the Psychology of Music journal. And it was found in our study that social support is an important predictor of well-being. So psychological resilience and social support really serve as protective resources. They don't necessarily protect against mental ill health, but they are really important resources to maintain at least a moderate level of functioning and well-being. And Ariel, you've also touched upon that as well already. So I kind of wanted to put that in there as well. And then lastly, what I do want to say is that you're not alone. And again, this was already said as well. It is a collective responsibility. It's for me, for you, for us. And I really do feel like the more informed you are, the better you can help yourself and others, because you do really have more of emotional capacity to also be there for others, and to really increase, both individual and group resiliency for just a healthier life in general, but also a healthier community. So that was it.
That's
Briefly.
fantastic. I mean, thank you so much. And I have to say, even though a lot of the conversation is about the performance-oriented music world, DJ world, electronic dance music world, the creatives in the music sector, I've got to say, I know that there are some arts and cultural people who are registered for this webinar. I think you also can look at the entire arts and cultural world, the people who put makeup on and go on stage, and the people behind the scenes.
Yeah.
That is a very stressful environment for many people who work at night. As you talked about from your own experience, it is sometimes the second or third job that they have in their world. There's a lot of social pressures around that. And so any of these tools, it seems to me, would apply to anybody else who works in that space, who works in the hospitality space, hotels and restaurants. And the very good tools and tips. And it's, I think there's an entire universe of services available that should be available here for the nighttime workforce. I appreciate your taking the lead in this particular portion of the nighttime economy. Thanks, Elaine. All right, Carly. I turn this over to you. Carly has made a name for herself in how she works the nighttime economy and the programs that she offers in Bristol. And I am just going to turn it over to you now, Carly. Ducks, go for it.
Thanks, Randall. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
Oh, brilliant. So hello, I'm Carly Heath. I'm the nighttime economy advisor for Bristol. I've worked in nightlife my whole life. I actually put my first party on when I was 13, and I've spent most of my life either at gigs or putting them on or being involved in them somewhere. And like Randall says, I spent quite a lot of time standing outside at 3 o'clock in the morning, handing out flyers for a good 10 years of my life. So lots of the work that I've done in Bristol has been focused around some of the problems that I've seen happen within nightlife, and being as a woman who works at night, and not necessarily being related to the venue itself, I also recognise that there's a real need to be supporting your freelancers, the artists that come into it, the people that work within those nightlife worlds that are better supported. So we've pulled some stuff together in Bristol, and as Ariel kind of leaned into, it's like, where are those resources within the city? This was funded for by Public Health. In the UK, we have got the fantastic NHS system, so we do have little pockets of money that we're able to draw down from. So this is a Public Health led project that we did, and that we looked around at the other resources that are around mental health and well-being within workplaces, and they were all pictures of well-lit buildings in offices. They didn't necessarily reflect what nighttime work is really about. So what we try to do is pull something together that reflects our needs and our industry. And we're also really keen not just to talk about mental health and the kind of problematic elements of it, but really thinking about well-being. How can we break the stigma around what mental health conversations, and not just responding when they're a crisis, but making sure that we have good jobs in the sector that look after our nighttime workforce. And for a city like Bristol, it's 41% of our jobs are between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. And that number is growing year on year. So this is where we started. We saw this stat. 4 out of 5 hospitality professionals have experienced a mental health issue during their career. This came from Burnt Chef. Now, we were absolutely astounded with this. We were really, really shocked. And we were trying to find how we could best support hospitality workers within that workforce, whilst recognizing actually there is a very little amount of support that was available at the time when we started doing this work. We know that hospitality has a really young workforce, particularly in a city like Bristol. We've got a very young population. It has low pay. There's less job security. And we were trying to work out how we could develop a public health approach towards this cohort. Also, amongst our young audiences, they have gone through so much stuff in the short amount of time. You know, if you've got your average 22-year-old, let alone just dealing with the pandemic and the lockdown and all of that kind of stuff, the things that went on in the UK around that period of time added a hell of a lot of anxiety to our young cohort workforce. It wasn't just the pandemic. We've got the cost of living. There's the Black Lives Matter movement. I don't know how many of you saw. We threw a statue of one of our slavers into the river after a massive demonstration in the city. We had riots in the city. There's the Me Too movement, and our young people are also dealing with anxiety around the climate crisis. So they're holding a lot of stuff on their shoulders, whilst having to turn up at work and be the vibe creators and try and get people to have good times when they come through our doors, so that we can go out and enjoy hospitality and dance our cares away and see our friends and things like that. So we're trying to make sure that we're focusing the sector specific response based on what the actual sector needs. We had a look at the data, and we found this really depressing. We know that hospitality workers have issues related to their workplace that day workers don't deal with. We know that our managers don't get the same offer of training that day workers tend to get, and they're not necessarily trained in how to respond, although they're usually very good at dealing with people. Recent research into suicide by occupation, which was done by the University of Bristol in 2021, it showed that the highest rates of suicide tend to be amongst workers with the lowest level of skill. Low-skilled workers, including those who work in hospitality, tend to receive lower pay, less job security, and they have a little control over their working patterns than higher skilled workers. And this puts them at a higher risk of suicide. Worryingly, when we looked at this data a little bit further, we saw that there was elevated rates of suicide amongst publicans and managers of licensed premises. So we knew that there really needed to be this specific answer themselves for hospitality itself. We held a round table with the sector to have a good discussion about the kinds of things that people were finding an issue and things that they would like us to deal with, not just from mental health, but also from an element of well-being. And these things are sometimes not just related to our work environment. Some of it is just related actually to the world that we live in. But we know that the workers in the hospitality sector experience behaviours specific to working environments. And these impacts on mental health and well-being, it's things like sexual harassment that's normalised on a daily basis. We might see violence, we might see fights, we might see people coming in states of serious being mentally unwell, and we have to respond to that whilst also trying to be the host for the evening. And there's exposure to unhealthy substance use, and alcohol can be one of these substances that we can have unhealthy behaviours in it. Managers and business owners in the nighttime economy, they respond to these issues on their premises, but they're not necessarily equipped to know how to deal with this stuff or know how the impacts of these events that can have on their staff. So we know that these need addressing. We also know that nightlife is a space where other intersectionality elements come into play, and Ariel really leaned into this, right? We talk all the time as nighttime advocates about creating safer spaces for women, for queer communities, for people of colour, but we also know that we have a higher level of neurodiversity amongst our workforce. Nighttime tends to be a very highly stimulating environment, so it's no great surprise that people with different neurodiversities flock towards it, but then that also adds another element if you don't know necessarily how to deal with that workforce and how to make sure that their needs are met. We also know that nighttime workers are paid less than daytime peers for doing the same job. So there's socio-economic elements that come into play, and there's lots of things that night workers are having to juggle. Nightlife works really, really hard behind the scenes to make sure that our spaces are welcoming and that our audiences are properly looked after. But really, who's looking after us? How can we make sure that we're looking after our own workforce so that they can do the job of looking after the city? I'm not going to read this list out. You can see the things there. And you'll probably reflect on actually how some of that might be within the world that you work. So in order to change the world, you have to get your head together first. Well, yeah, Jimmy, thanks for that. But this is only part of the story, right? And in the case of workplace well-being, it's actually not quite correct. Companies around the world spent £61 billion on wellness inventions in 2021. That amount is expected to grow to 94 billion in 26. But the problem is that most workplace wellbeing interventions cost money and they take up time. If you're a small operator, you haven't got the energy to be able to do that. But they also they have little or no impact on employee well-being. Offering people well-being apps or things like that, where it's all personal responsibility, can actually undermine workplace well-being. It turns out that the most effective way to improve employee mental health is by reducing stress rather than adding new ways to be able to cope with it. So what does good advice actually look like for night workers, and how can we create mentally healthy workspaces that are rooted in the reality of our nighttime? First of all, don't tell me to get more sleep. We know we're tired. We know we'll work late at night. Every single bit of advice that I saw was like, why don't you go for a walk at lunchtime? Get more sleep, eat a better meal. Well, great. I work in a trading estate in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere. It's dark. It's not really that safe to go for a walk at 1 a.m. And the only food available is a greasy burger van. Brilliant. So all of the advice you've got for me doesn't count for what it looks like in my rooted reality. So what does good advice actually look like? We found this. We love it. The 7 types of rest. There's 7 types of rest that everybody needs. Yes, we know we need more sleep, physical rest. We need emotional rest. We need to talk to our friends, to take time to process our thoughts, to improve our moods and improve our emotional balance. We need sensory rest. We need to turn the lights down and dim the noise. Nightlife is a highly sensory environment. I mean, if you've ever worked in a restaurant with clattering plates and everything else, you know just how loud it can be. We need spiritual rest. That doesn't necessarily mean we need to believe in a deity, but it's about connecting with your beliefs and a bigger purpose. We need mental rest. We need time to daydream, to doodle. We need to give our brains a rest from thinking about the never-ending to-do list that we have. We need social rest. Ironic because we work in social spaces, but we need to spend quality time with friends and strengthen those connections outside of our work environments. And we need creative rest. We need to explore nature. We need to explore art. We need new hobbies. We need to use our imagination. And if we can incorporate these things into our lives, then hopefully there is a better sense of well-being, whilst also recognizing the need for physical rest. But stress, right? Our bodies produce stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. Stress is not all stress is bad. Stress is totally normal. Everybody gets stressed. Sometimes it's even pretty useful, but it's not very good to let it build up. Stress produces these hormones in your body, such as adrenaline and cortisol, and these activate your fight and flight responses. It was really useful when we were living in caves and fighting bears, but it's not so useful when you're trying to change a barrel in the middle of service. And also, I think it's really important to say that stress and anxiety are different things. Stress is a response to something external, tight deadlines, arguments with your friends, or customers that are being difficult. But we need to be able to process this stress. It's not designed to let and sit within our bodies. Stress can become anxiety when we start to internalize it. Now, anxiety is defined as the persistent feeling of apprehension or dread. If we don't manage our anxiety levels, these can cause all sorts of issues, both physical and emotional and long term. There's things like stomach issues, headaches, heart problems, breathing issues, fertility problems, diabetes, as well as mental health issues. So we need to really make sure that as a workforce, we're getting on top of our stress. And when we're thinking about night workers, we're thinking about the creative element of our night workers. There's a fantastic study that says about performers and stress. Musicians produce the same amount of stress hormones during a performance as somebody who is jumping out of a plane. Now, when you come off stage, having just jumped off a plane, you need to find a way down and regulate yourselves. And we probably don't have enough conversations about how to do that. You know, like Elaine was talking about going back to your hotel room and having to kind of calm down at the end of it. We need some better conversations about how to moderate our stress levels, whilst also recognizing that this is natural things that's going on in our body. It's our hormones. We can't do anything about it. So what do we do? Some of you might recognize this. I'm hoping it's going to play. The stress bucket. If we imagine our ability to process stress as a bucket, the things that cause us stress go into the bucket, right? We don't want the bucket to be full. We don't want the bucket to be overflowing. We need to be able to empty the bucket over the course of our life, over the course of our daily lives. And there's things that go into the bucket, and they might be environmental, they might be health related, they might be emotional, they're overwhelming reactions to things, it could be cognitive, it could just be that you can't afford your rent, you know, all sorts of different things that go into your stress bucket. And to be a resilient person is your individual ability to be able to manage stress. And this can be fostered. We can build resilience like a muscle over time. We can grow it like any muscle in the body. And we need to do things like take a break, exercise, see our friends, you know, all of those different types of rest to be able to empty that stress bucket. So one of the exercises that we ask people that we recommend people go through is actually like, how is your stress bucket doing at the moment? Like, when was the last time you spent some time trying to fill it? And are you overflowing? And what can you do to help yourself in that moment of time? But when we're talking about creating mentally healthy workplaces, right, it's more than just what the individual can do to monitor their own well-being. We need to try and find a way to foster healthy workplaces so that it's not just on the individual's responsibility to look after their own mental well-being, but we're not trying to do things, we're not doing things as operators that is actually making their lives harder. We want to empower, in Bristol, we want to empower compassionate leadership. And we think that this is at the heart of creating mentally healthy workplaces. So what does this look like? We ask people, as part of our Thrive at Night suite of resources that we have, we ask our operators to make a commitment to mental health, make a commitment to the mental health of your workforce. We want people to build your approach, empower your team to communicate openly about how they're feeling and take their feedback about workplace stress on board. You know, don't just let them rant at you and then do nothing different about it. You need to actually put things into place that enable change. We need to create a positive culture that reduces stress linked to work. And we need to have a plan to identify the issues and then redesign your workplace around them if that is appropriate or necessary. We can provide support and training, not just for employees, but also to managers to try and help them become compassionate leaders. There's things like employee assistance programs. Lots of small hospitality spaces don't have those. The corporate sector do much better. If you work in an office, you've normally got one, whereas night workers tend to not get that. If staff need to take some time off, pay them. You know, people come to work when they're not really okay because they don't have enough money to be able to survive. So is there anything within your well-being policies that actually looks after your staff through those kinds of things? And helping people to recover. If somebody is struggling with alcohol or other substances, simply sacking them could be the thing that sends them on a downhill spiral. We need to make sure that employees are supported, and those who are struggling, make sure that they're supported back into work and that they can deal with what's going on in their lives right now, but then they can come back more resilient and knowing that you care about them within the workplace. Now, we have so many different policies that affect nightlife. You know, we have our women's safety policy, we have our harm reduction policy, we have something on serious incidences. We have, in the UK, we have our Health and Safety at Work Act, which is all around your duty of care. But what happens? Or lots of these tend to be forward facing. They tend to be about dealing with the public. How do these reflect back onto your staff? Are your women's safety champions given the support in the burden of challenging harassment on a daily basis? Do they get supported in being able to enact these policies? If you've experienced a trauma at work or a serious incident relating to, I don't know, like drug deaths or violence or sexual violence, is the person who's responding to that, are they supported in being able to make sure that they can come back from that more resilient? I've had incidences where I've seen really, really violent fights in front of me, and I've had to call the ambulance and deal with the really awful scenarios, and then go straight behind the bar and carry on serving as if everything's normal. Now, how do we make sure that we're looking after our staff in those moments of time, particularly if they're 18, 19, 20 years old? You know, in the UK, under 21, we can drink from 18. So perhaps those over the other side of the pond might be a bit older. And what about freelancers? How are they included in your wellbeing policy? Make sure that we're thinking about visiting artists and that we're looking after their well-being whilst they're there. You know, if a rider comes through and it's only got alcohol on it and it's not got any fruit on it, is there anything that you can be doing to make sure that your touring artists are properly looked after? And thinking about your harm reduction policy, does this also include your staff, or is it just a harm reduction policy for your audiences that come through the door? So I'm not going to whittle on too much longer. I'm just going to put up an offer on the screen there. We've got loads of resources that we've collected all of this best practice information into a couple of different handy workbooks. It's packed full of information. The manager's handbook is about how to create mentally healthy workspaces, and it does the policy kind of work, the questions that you might need to ask, and then this workbook is much more designed for the actual individual worker themselves. So please download them, have a look through them, and let me know what you think, because we're always looking to improve.
Fantastic. I will include all these links when I post to the video to the website. Carly, thank you so much. My head is just spinning. But the bottom line is, if you want to care about the nighttime workforce of your community, if you want to care about the nighttime workforce at your business or your organization, if you want to care about yourself as a nighttime worker, there are things that can be done, and it is important that this happens. So I am going to actually go over here and see if there are any questions or chat questions that have popped up. Let's see. Oh, lots of accolades, lots of links. Thank you all so much. I'm very appreciative of that. I don't see questions from others myself yet, so I'm going to ask one. Our conversation here, we're five Anglo people. Are the rules different for people of color? We're majority female here. Are there rules different for men in wellness? Men have a harder time kind of going there. So what about for communities of color? Do we know more?
I think so. I did recently a panel about hip hop health.
Right.
I think I actually did with Dougie Fresh at Fotografiska, New York. And there's real disparity in healthcare within the hip hop community and the Black and Brown community. I think we see um, le- like a lesser quality of service, even if they get it, hesitation, lack of funds, lack of resources, lack of information, stigma. During the pandemic, we lost so many greats within the hip hop community who, again, it's a very difficult lifestyle, DJing and touring. And if you add on the layer of disparity of access to good quality healthcare and also dealing with stigma, whether it be around mental health or even physical health, then yeah, you need to be able to acknowledge that. And it's escaping me now, sadly. I'll Google it. There are dedicated organizations like the one Dougie Fresh started that specifically address those stigmas and funding issues and disparity of quality
Okay.
of health.
If you find that, send that to me and I'll include it along with the
I'll do
post.
it.
I see here a question for Carly. Let me jump to this. A lot of your conversation is about preventative measures that need to be inserted into the whole process of the nighttime economy. None of us who have worked in the nighttime space have ever liked the regulatory people who show up when there's a problem. Well, just as Ariel pointed out with her initiative of stopping the kind of stormtrooper approach to dive bombing into bars and clubs to solve problems, the problem solving opportunity, as Aileen also talks about, is before the problem surfaces. So here is a question of you, Carly, that talks about going even further ahead of, almost at the incubator stage of nighttime employees. Do you also address youth centers and schools? Are they potential workers, artists, and nighttime economy folks? How do you plant the seed? We're in the nursery of nighttime workers. What about that, Carly? Do you do that?
Well, no, actually, but not because, but I think that certainly working with schools, working with young people, working with their well-being, that's the job for the education sector. My job is a nighttime economy advisor, and my job is to represent the city from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. They are incredibly well resourced to be able to do lots of work with young people elsewhere. And like there's lots of resources out there for workplace well-being,
Right.
but it's all of that kind of bad advice that isn't rooted on what actually happens for nighttime workers. It's growing, it's changing in the UK. There's quite a few organizations that are coming through which are absolutely fantastic when it comes to Ariel, you're talking about men needing more support. We've got a great organization that started in Bristol called Talk Club, and that is a talking space for men. They talk about mental fitness as if it's kind of in that more competitive side of things, and how are you out of 10, and like normalized conversations. But there's also some great organizations like Help Musicians that do really good work with our artists. You know, I don't necessarily see my job as to be the answer to all things. My job is to pull those resources together and display the ones that are most appropriate to the people who work at night, and the challenges that they tell us that they have.
I'm going to also add, there were a lot of people that registered for this course who are in related industries to the nighttime economy: transportation planners, lighting designers, urban planners. So we have folks that are, you know, they're contributing, or they could contribute to solutions, right? I mean, you were talking about somebody taking a break in their nighttime lunch and going outside. So for our partners, our allies in the nighttime space who could be more mindful, to borrow Aileen's phrase, of the nighttime workforce, but who are not necessarily of the nighttime workforce, what message would you tell them? What is it just about being conscious? How do you get in their consciousness, Aileen?
It's really about education. I see myself more of an educator, you know, over being a coach, a consultant. And it's really about learning people to be, teaching people to learn to be more human, I believe. And it's about learning to self-reflect without judging yourself, without judging others, and with the full capability of being able to embrace your vulnerability and not seeing that as a weakness, but as a strength. And this really starts, you know, in society, in the way we grow up, in the messages that we hear from the moment we are capable of, you know, understanding, like from the minute we're like 3 years old, you know. And so I feel repetition is key here when we want to learn things, when we want to install new habits, new ways of living. We need repetition, you know. That's just the way it is. We have to learn to automate certain things, and also open ourselves up to other people's experiences. It's not because you're not exposed to it or don't expose yourself to something that it's not there. And I feel like these are definitely conversations that I still have with a lot of men, for example, in my environment about, you know, harassment. I'm still hearing people say like, oh, really? It's 2023. I thought that this was better. And I'm like, in what world are you living? Seriously, come on. You know,
Okay, well,
but
that's
even from
terrific.
people
No, I
close
get
to
it.
me.
I
So,
get
you
it.
know,
And that 24-hour
yeah.
nation has been about for a couple of years now about just getting in front of people's heads and putting
Mhm.
in their mind that there is this world, and mindfulness is important. So that reputation is very good. I'm going to ask my last question of Ariel, and then we'll wrap up. I was recently on Reddit, which unto itself is a mistake, but I found myself defending the importance of our city's nightlife and nighttime scene and cultural economies, and defending the different kinds of needs of the hundreds of thousands of people who work at night. Why is it important, Ariel, that we give attention to the nighttime space and the people who fuel the nighttime space?
Well, I think we've demonstrated that at length this past hour. You know, I think there's this very artificial separation between day and night and day. I mean, life is 24 hours. We have very similar needs and also very unique needs, but this is all about, you know, society, culture, economy, well-being of society at large. And we live day and night. Whether you work at night or not, you're out at night, you know people who are out at night. We have 24-hour economies. And I think, you know, that's an inherent historic issue around government is seeing that divide, using daytime management styles and solutions to address issues at night that are very unique and different around traffic, security, sanitation, well-being. But at the end of the day, it's an artificial divide that has been based on many things. Um, Only bad things happen after midnight. The freaks come out at night. Um, Also, a lot of racist and
Oh, sure.
homophobic implications that, people who work at night and go out at night are less productive, less contributory, more dangerous. And these are false narratives, like many narratives that we have are developed to oppress. And so I think we've really seen a shift in this dramatically. I mean, the global nighttime governance movement is raging. It's more like a tsunami at this point. There's a new one every week. We all in this space demonstrate why it's important. Just last week, Barcelona, appointed is agreed to appoint one. So I kind of feel like we also need to change the conversation a little bit. I mean, I think we can start to acknowledge and agree that we have come a long way from that thinking, that nighttime has been acknowledged as valuable and imperative to social, economic, cultural, and personal well-being. And the pandemic really helped us to demonstrate what life would be like without life at night and without
Mm.
our nightlife spaces. And I think it also helped to dispel the stigma around well-being and mental health challenges. We all sort of are in the same boat. We all got hit with the same mental health challenge in a way, and it helped everyone be able to speak about it in a way because there was no way anyone could have escaped that.
Yeah.
And so I think we're in a good place. I think we can start to say, are we there yet? No, but have we come a long way? And is nightlife part of the valuable, essential part of nighttime and daytime world we live in? Yes. So.
That's wonderful. Ariel, Carly, Aileen, thank you so much for being on this panel today. For those of you who are still with us and haven't had to go off to your next meeting or call, thank you for joining us. This webinar will be on the 24-Hour Nation website, 24hournation.com, in just probably before the day's up in the United States, and will be on our YouTube channel. Final reference, 24-Hour Nation is this clearinghouse of information. It is a public service project. I just do this because I'm bored and I love the night. All right. And so we have webinars, podcasts, plans, programs, initiatives, projects, research, all parked on the website. Go take a look and become an advocate in your community for the people who work at night. Thank you so much again, ladies. We'll see you all around at night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
This was really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Randall.
Bye-bye.